All right, well, we're here with Bruce Zachary. And Bruce, it's such an honor and a privilege to be able to talk to you. And today we want to talk about just mission, vision, and alignment. And so, would you just give listeners just a little bit of background of where you're at, where you're serving, and what God's doing in your world?
Yeah, Daniel, thank you for asking, and it's my pleasure to be with you and your listeners. My name is Bruce Zachary, and I am the founding and lead pastor at Calvary Nexus in Camarillo, California, where we church planted 21 years ago. And I'm now blessed to serve in a great and albeit large community of faith. Um, During the 2011 year, I began to direct the Calvary Church Planting Network, a global church planting initiative, and I'm privileged to help in that initiative as well. I really have a heart to see church leaders grow and develop and be more effective in their kingdom calling. And so it's a pleasure to talk to you about those subjects.
Yeah, so Bruce, you've planted church, you've founded church, you've coached churches, and so I thought I've learned a great amount of alignment and vision and mission and just thinking through that stuff from you. And so I thought I would ask you just a bunch of questions about that. Um, and the first is this: why is a mission statement even important for a church, for an organization, for a leader to know what their purpose is and why they're doing what they're doing?
Yeah, let me start by making a distinction between mission and vision because sometimes those terms get used interchangeably. And so, for our purpose, when I talk about mission, I'm talking about core values of a church that don't change over the course of time. In other words, they're long-standing. They would be long-standing 10 years down the road, 20 years down the road, whereas vision may change more frequently. So I think it's extremely important for churches to have a sense of their identity, a sense of what they're called to, and to be able to articulate that as a mission and something that is concise that other people can hold on to. So for Calvary Nexus in this season of our church life, we have just clung for the last 20 years to a mission statement of loving God and living His Word. And in this season, for the next 10 years, we cling to this mission of being a movement of Jesus followers devoted to loving God and loving their neighbors. And so for us, it's really important to have that sense of mission as a compass, a true north, that if something is out of alignment with our mission, we tend to say no to it.
Mm-hmm. So where do you come up with vision and mission? Like what makes a good mission statement, and do you just read a book about it? Do you go to the Bible? Do you pray? Like how do people and leaders come up with a mission statement, a vision statement?
Yeah, I think there's 5 characteristics that may be helpful to keep in mind that make a good mission or vision statement. And so you want it to be clear that people are able to understand what's being said. That's the first characteristic. And because I'm a pastor, all these words will start with C.
Oh,
Uh,
beautiful.
yeah. So I want it to be clear. You want it to be concise. In other words, you're imagining something that could be printed on a Post-it note, printed on a business card, something that when somebody sees your church website or some literature that you've published, you can print it there because it's concise. It'll fit and people can remember it. You want it to be catalytic in the sense that people inside of the church, people are already part of the group, are moved to change the status quo. So it's a catalyst, so catalytic. And then compelling. And the compelling idea is that people outside of the church or outside of the organization hear this mission. It's like, yeah, man, that really stirs my heart. I want to get involved in it. So it compels others who are outside to move to the inside. And then finally, and I think this really gets to the question you're asking, contextual. So every church has a context. For example, what goes on with Bill Hybels at Willow Creek or what goes on with Rick Warren at Saddleback is in that context. And that might not fit the context of a Calvary Chapel, and it may fit the context. So churches that have a real emphasis on Bible teaching, that is something that's near and dear to their heart. Those that care for the homeless, for foster, for adoption,
Hmm.
all of those different contexts help to form the mission statement.
Yeah, that's good because so often you get cute little mission statements or vision and you just want to copy the next church rather than contextualizing and being yourself to what God has called you to do.
Yeah, and the problem is that you can't take on somebody's DNA. In other words, if you're looking at another church and thinking, well, we'll just do what they're doing. If it's not your DNA, that it's not going to be effective. What stirs your heart? I encourage pastors to think about what keeps you up late at night, what motivates you to wake up early in the morning, what makes you laugh or dance, what makes you cry, what breaks your heart. As you contemplate the things that really stir you, that you're passionate about, those things should be at the core or the essence of your mission.
Yeah. No, that's great. Okay, so once you receive that vision and you're using those 5 C's to get clarity and catalyst and communicate, there's another C. It's communication. Okay. And so you as a leader, your role is to speak vision and to communicate the vision that God has put on your heart, where you see you want people to go. And so, what are some practical ways that you as a leader have found effective to communicate vision to those that are following you?
Yeah, the first rule of thumb that I would suggest for your listeners, for leaders generally, is repeat it in every medium that you can consider. In
Mm.
other words, you've got it communicated orally as a leader. You're speaking it. You might put it in a program in print. You might create a brochure, a full color brochure to communicate it. You're going to have it on the website. You're going to have it on cards. You're going to have it in the foyer or the lobby of the church. As many different mediums artistically. Put it up as big posters. Put it up in different forms, cards. Every way that you can communicate it, do so. And brand things consistently. You don't want it to look like some hodgepodge patchwork quilt, but you want it to have a thematic branding so that it looks stylistically as one whole unit in many different pieces. The
Hmm.
second rule of thumb that I would give is to repeat it ad nauseum. In other words, when you're at the point where you've heard it so often that you're ready just to gag from repeating it, that's about the first time the audience that you're speaking to is starting to get it. And
Hmm.
that resist the idea when somebody comes up to you as a leader and says, man, I've heard this already. You've said this multiple times. And you're thinking like, maybe I ought to pull back and not repeat it so much. What you're not understanding is the 90 other percent of the people who are gathered still haven't got it yet, even though somebody's complaining that they've heard it enough.
Yeah. So would
So,
you say, because I tell us all the time, especially with my wife, she goes, Daniel, I'm tired of you saying that. You say that all the time. And then in my mind, I think, you finally got it.
yeah, I think that's a great example. Yeah, I think using video, using testimony to have people tell their story on a Sunday, even though that can be messy, of how that mission or how that vision is impacting their life,
Hmm.
as many ways as you can communicate it, the better.
Now it's easy to sometimes start things, and like you're saying, repeating is a consistent thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. As you just keep on doing the thing that God's called you to do. But yet we see in so many churches and even leaders drift away from the mission and the vision. Can you explain to us maybe why that happens and how that can actually hurt a church and a leader when they go to a conference and get new vision, and then they go to that conference and they do this and they do, and they're not consistent in repeating the same thing over and over again?
Okay. Yeah, before directly answering the question, let's now distinguish again mission and vision. So, mission, long standing, you're thinking 10 to 20 years
Mm-hmm.
of a value that's not changing. A vision, depending on the context, could be a 1 year vision or multiple year vision. And so, the more stability that church leadership has. In other words, I've been a lead pastor in my church community for over 20 years. I've got a lot of stability, a lot of tenure. The more successful you've been, the greater the degree of trust that the congregation has with leadership, and the greater the influence. In other words, in a larger church, they could have a bigger scope of vision than in a smaller church. So if you imagine some behemoth church like Saddleback, if Rick Warren comes up with a 20-year vision to reach Africa, you might think, yeah, this guy might do it. If you're thinking about a church planter who's been in Portland for 6 months and he's like, yeah, we're going to reach Portland through our church. It's like, really? There's 25 of us here, bro. I'm not sure this is going to happen. So depending on those factors, you can think more long term. And the further out you're thinking, the more that you have to remain steadfast in
Hmm.
terms of that vision to see it through, because you're going to lose credibility. If every year you have this new vision and there's no traction to get these things done and actually implement the vision, people lose confidence in their leaders. So you have to stay on target. And the best way, I think, to stay on target is not to get distracted by things that aren't your vision or your mission. In other words, whether you're in a small church or a large church, there's going to be constant ideas that are presented to you that, Pastor, we should be doing this or we should be doing that. And if it doesn't fit in your vision, if it doesn't fit in your mission, you have to say no, because all of those resources are going to be pulling you away from your vision and mission. So not literally everything, but do you say no to, but you have to evaluate everything and say, is this going to keep us from doing our mission, or is this going to help us to do our mission? And if it's going to distract, I'd recommend saying no.
Yeah.
And so that's the process that you have to go through. And that's hard
Yeah.
because you don't want to disappoint people and you don't want them to be upset with you. And that's the problem for pastors often.
Yeah. I tell our leaders all the time, you have to say no to good things so you can say yes to great things.
That's great wisdom, Daniel. Yeah, and I think once you've got your vision articulated and now you've articulated your vision and your mission, you can explain to people why you're not doing that good thing that they've suggested,
Yeah.
because it doesn't fit in our mission. Vision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so when you know the vision from Jesus of what he's called you to do, that can produce steadfastness and character and faithfulness into doing that, because you know there's nothing better to do than just doing the thing God's called you to do. And so,
Yeah. There is a difference. There's three different gifts that you're contemplating, or abilities. One is the ability to receive vision from God. In other words, that you have a sense that God inspired you as a leader and in the context of the church or the organization that you lead to move forward to change the status quo. The second skill that we talked about is then being able to communicate that effectively so that people understand, they get it, and they're motivated. It's compelling, it's catalytic. And then the third is to figure out where you want to be, where you are, and the steps to get from where you are to where you want to be. That's a different skill, that kind of strategic thinking skill. And once you figure out the steps, being able to then implement and go from one step to the next to get to the desired destination. And that's a gift from God. It takes perseverance, it takes endurance, it takes willingness to put up with some of the unintended consequences, because every time you bring about change, some people are going to be resistant to it. And some
yeah.
people are actually going to leave the local church because it's not what they want or what they came to that local church for. And so you have to be prepared for that as some of the unintended consequences. And Jesus said, before you go build or before you go to war, count the cost.
Yep.
And so visionary leaders need to be prepared that 10%, 20% of the people might find themselves in another fellowship, but God will bring people to rally around this new vision and to see it come to pass.
Yeah. What would you practically say for us that want to get vision done? We're maybe visionary leaders and we want to, we see the status quo to be changed and way out here. But ultimately, the leaders have to get stuff done, or it's just they're just talking. And so, alignment is a big thing. If you have a vision from the Lord, or you have this passion, this burden to do something, what are practical steps as a leader, as a church? How do you systemize that to make it effective? And I'll give you an example. Congratulations, you just taught through the book of Matthew. It was amazing. What was it? 75 messages?
Yes.
Okay. And so you had a vision. You're like, I remember we were together and you're like, what do you think about this graphic? I'm going to teach for the next year and a half this because I feel like God's calling us to this. So we're going to actually go for the next boom, boom. And you just had this nice, you were an amazing thinker of like laying out, okay, here's the big vision, but these are the steps I need to take. Can you talk a little bit about the steps that people need to think about when, because I think we can get frustrated when we see this big vision, but we don't have those practical steps of goals to get there. And as leaders, we need to get there, you know?
Yeah. Again, I think there's a diversity of gifts, and very few people that I deal with, and I deal with literally hundreds of pastors coaching and mentoring, very few of them have the ability to discern vision, then to communicate vision,
Mm-hmm.
then to determine the steps, and then the ability to implement. Some have one, some have a couple, but very few have that complete package. So the first thing I would say is don't be discouraged if you don't have the complete package. The second encouragement that I would give is to find someone who has the pieces that you don't have. In other words, if you got somebody who's a really good communicator in terms of branding this in different ways, video, print, etc., through your messages, let that person consult you. If you have someone who's really good at figuring out the steps, let that person consult in that part. Then the implementation part that you're talking about, I think it's really helpful once you've figured out the milestones, you've broken down this journey of 1,000 steps into 1,000 steps, is to lay them out, and then you have to create meaningful periodic intervals to review. So depending on the person, that could be a weekly evaluation or every 2 weeks, presumably every month. It can't wait to every 3 months. And what I would suggest to people as a thought is just to create time leadership. Most of us have the idea of time management. In other words, if you've got a 1 hour counseling appointment, at the end of an hour, you say to somebody, I'm sorry, our time is up. We can reschedule another time to get together. And that's just time management. Time leadership, in contrast, is that idea that you schedule time in your calendar to make sure that the vision is moving forward. So let's say Thursday from noon to 2 o'clock, that's the time that you're reviewing these milestones to see how are we progressing, what's slipping through the cracks, why is it slipping through the cracks, what do we need to do to move that forward. And you and your team have that regularly scheduled time, and don't let anything interfere with it. That's the most important thing. So our team, we meet 3 Tuesday mornings out of a month from 8 o'clock to 10:30 a.m. So our core pastor team, which is in our context 6 pastors, we meet every Tuesday, or at least 3 Tuesdays out of a month, with the sole purpose of focusing on the macro level vision of the church, the 30,000 foot level, and we don't let anything carve into that time. That's the priority.
That's great. I love that. I love that you said you can't do it all, so you have to have a team, and then you actually have to prioritize what you value. Because really, vision is what you value, the mission and stuff, and you need to prioritize your time to lead in that.
Yeah, I've been noticing none of us is as good as all of us combined. So um, I really think most of us as lead pastors, we tend to think that we're the smartest guy in the room, um, which might be the case, but yet none of us is as smart as all of us combined. So I think it's important for us as pastors to see the vision come to pass. It can't be a one-man thing. It's got to be a team.
Yeah,
So you've got different like concentric circles, like a target. And so you've got your core leaders and that next level of leaders then going out. And so all of them have to be working towards that same vision. It's got to be something that the whole church is focused on, in my opinion.
yeah. Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks for talking mission and vision. And is there any last words or anything you want to say? Just encouragement to guys that are seeking God for vision and people just following the things that God's calling them to do.
Yeah, my encouragement is to seek out mentors. And it's great if you have one mentor who can mentor you in many areas, but there's nothing wrong with having multiple mentors in various areas. So you might have somebody who's great in this area of your life. You might have somebody else who can speak into your life in another area. And so the leadership question that I would pose to any leader is, who's mentoring you and who are you mentoring? And if you can create a culture in your local church where everybody who's got the title leader whether it's a prayer leader, refreshments leader, youth leader, whatever title has the word leader in it, that person should be able to answer the question, I'm being mentored by X, Y, and Z, and these are the people that I'm mentoring. And if down the line those people are mentoring other people, then you've created a leadership structure that you can build upon. That would be my last thought. Simple and good. And thanks for the work you're doing for the kingdom, my friend. I appreciate you and love you.
Hey, well, I appreciate you, and I thank you for being one of the mentors that I look to and learn and glean a lot from. So, thanks so much for just talking with me about this great important topic.